Well, good morning, Ari. Good morning, Kate. I'm Patrick Woodcock, President and CEO of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. We're very pleased to announce that legislation has been printed with strong bipartisan support to make significant reforms to Maine's paid family and medical leave program. Since the law has passed, I have heard from employers across the state of the ramifications, not only what this law would mean for their business, but overall what that means for the state's economy. I don't need to tell anybody that the uncertainty of the state's economy and future trajectory has been altered significantly just in the last few months. As a result, we've looked across all the other states that have implemented state paid family medical leave programs and assessed which aspects of those programs could be integrated into Maine's program. We're very pleased to have bipartisan support. Representative Tiffany Roberts from Berwick is sponsoring the legislation that makes key three changes. One, the amount of wage replacement is addressed by replicating what other states provide in New England. In Maine's current law, employees are eligible up to 90% of their wages when they move forward with leave. We have proposed that Maine replicate what other states in New England have had with about two-thirds of wage replacement. That not only improves the fiscal solvency of the program, but also ensures that utilization of the program will be in line with other states. That improves the solvency and encourages workforce participation. In addition, the proposed bill would ensure that those employers that are most vulnerable to leave have the ability to assert hardship and work out leave in a schedule that works for the employee and with the employer. What's unique about Maine's economy is we have significant seasonality. I'm very concerned about the small businesses that are already struggling to find a workforce. What Maine's paid family medical leave program could do to exacerbate an already challenging situation. Finally, the legislation would be comparable to fine requirements, retaining a fine but replicating what Colorado has to ensure that those who are just trying to implement what is a complicated program are not hit with enormous fines while they're trying to accomplish and implement a program. Maine's paid family medical leave program is one of the most significant state labor laws in a generation. We want to make sure that Maine's paid family medical leave program works for employees, employers, and the state's economy. We need to make a mainstream law that works for all three of those entities. It will have significant ramifications if we don't make changes in a bipartisan fashion. I'm going to turn to Paul Bolin with Northern Light to express the potential ramifications of the law for that employer. Paul?
Thanks, Patrick. At Northern Light, we have plans to implement a substantially equivalent plan to make sure that we're both providing the services to our employees as well as that they would expect, as well as the benefits provided under the law. We think we can do that in a private plan with conditions and terms that would mirror or be in favor and an improvement over what the state provides. One of the things that Patrick mentioned in particular is the flat 65% wage replacement, which is an industry standard and best practice to both provide a safety net for those who need to use paid family leave, but also encourages returning to the workforce at a time when it's appropriate for them to do so. It also provides solvency for the plan. We certainly have concerns that the plan, as it's currently stated with the state, would have trouble with funding over time and could potentially increase the cost to employers and employees through changes in the payroll tax over the coming years. But we certainly see this bipartisan approach as a very reasonable, pragmatic approach that benefits both the employees, the employers, and would likely provide ease of administration from the state's perspective as well as those administering private plans. So we're certainly in favor and support of the proposed legislation.
With that, I want to make sure that we get a perspective from the hospitality industry and turn to Nate Cloutier with the Maine Hospitality Association. Nate?
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, from the hospitality and tourism perspective, we're very pleased to see this bipartisan approach. Something that we hear from our restaurant, lodging, and tourism related members is that this program is coming and they are uncertain of what the implications are going to be on their business. The issue of employee absences, especially in an uncertain economy. And we just heard yesterday from the governor's conference on tourism that tourism had declined again last year and has not reached pre-pandemic levels. So employers are very concerned about the issue of not being able to count on having a reliable workforce when there is already a lingering workforce shortage. We hope to see that the committee will come together and really listen to employers and advocates and find some sensible solutions to make sure that this is going to be a program that works for everybody. We know that it's going to be, there are major costs to this. We're hoping that because there is this bipartisan push that, everybody from the governor to down to the committee and all legislators will be receptive to what the business community has to say about this. So thank you, Patrick.
And then lastly, I did want to turn to Mindy Patterin, a shareholder with Littler, to explain some of the legal components of the current law and proposed changes.
Yes, I wanted to emphasize some of the most impactful aspects of the bill for the business communities, things that we hope will make the program very successful. The amendment gives an employer the ability to determine whether the employee's requested leave will create an undue hardship on the business. And that was the original intent of the statute. For example, the amendment allows small businesses with fewer than 15 employees to determine that the leave will create an undue hardship because of the size of the business. And so that's extremely important for small businesses. It will also allow seasonal businesses to determine that a leave will create an undue hardship during the height of the tourist season, which is clearly critical for our tourism business. It also allows employers to determine that a leave will constitute an undue hardship if more than 25% of its workforce is scheduled to be out of work. And these are critical changes for the business community that will allow businesses to manage their labor needs and to continue to operate. Also, as we've heard, but I do want to emphasize the importance of the amendment streamlining the determination of the weekly benefit amount, which makes it more equitable. And under the amendment, all employees would be entitled to 65% of their average weekly wage while on leave. So it makes it just much more easy to determine, and it's just fair. And this is consistent with what other states have done successfully. The amendment also clarifies that employees are required to pay 50% of their premium, which is to be deducted from employee wages. It also clarifies that the deduction of the premium is not subject to bargaining under a collective bargaining agreement. So that helps both public and private employers. And finally, the amendment takes a common sense approach to penalties for missed premium contributions. The proposed revision ties any penalty to the number of employees impacted by the violation instead of an employer's total payroll, instead of an employer's total annual payroll. The Department of Labor may also waive the penalty when it determines that waiver is appropriate under the circumstances. So these are some very common sense approaches that will make the the program more manageable for employers and will hopefully help to make the program successful for everyone over the long run.
We certainly think LD 1712, which was just printed, represents pragmatic reforms, retains basic protections of Maine's paid family medical leave, but brings it into a mainstream program that works for employees, employers, and the state's economy alike. We are so pleased to have bipartisan support for this legislation. We think this works for Maine's moment in its economy, the uncertainty ahead, and the seasonality of Maine's businesses. With that, we'd be happy to answer any questions about the legislation and again, express appreciation for Representative Roberts for sponsoring the legislation.
Hey, thanks for hosting this. Could you remind me what the bill number is?
LD 1712.
And has that already been introduced? And do you know if there's a public hearing scheduled yet?
We don't have a formal announcement of when the public hearing. The reason we are holding this is the bill was just printed. So it was just announced within the last 72 hours with the bill and sponsorships. And we certainly are encouraged. It's one of the more bipartisan paid family medical leave bills that we've seen introduced.
Thanks, Ari. Hey, WGME team, any questions from your end? If not, Patrick or Paul or Jake or Mindy or Nate, any final thoughts?
No, I would just reinforce this is one of the most significant undertakings from the state's Department of Labor. We certainly appreciate the hard work from the employees at DOL to move this program forward. Ultimately, the statute, we think, does need to be revised to work for the state's economy, reflect the seasonality of Maine's workforce, and ultimately, we are also encouraged of legislation to protect those employers that have existing paid family medical leave plans in place. That's been a significant concern from the Maine State Chamber of Commerce since the rules were filed. And certainly Paul can speak to the impacts of one significant employer as well.
Sure. So the impact of the delay, or rather the first quarter of taxation, Northern Light, as one example, is about $1 million a month being split between the organization and our staff. So the ability to avoid that, if we're not going to participate in the plan because we'll be sponsoring our own substantially equivalent plan, is certainly something that is of note.
Sorry, just one last question, and I would hate to make anyone sort of repeat yourself, but I was just wondering, like, what are sort of like the couple just key takeaways of this bill? Like, what are the 2 or 3 most important things that you think it does?
I can add from an employer's perspective, the flat 65% wage replacement, that really is a standard, and that's been both for private insured plans, for paid family leave in other states. It really is a best practice level of funding to provide wage replacement and the security for the worker, but also a plan that is solvent over time with the tax that the state has implemented on this. But in addition to that, it provides an incentive to return to work when you're able to do that. Because it's more advantageous to be working and be paid your full wage versus a 2/3 wage. So there's a number of benefits that are tried and true, and that's one of the most important factors from an employer's perspective in terms of ensuring that employees have the protections that they need, but also the encouragement to return to work as soon as they're able.
And I'd also like to add that the proposed amendments to the undue hardship provision, I think, are critical to employers so that they can manage their labor needs, and so important to small businesses and to the tourism industry to be able to manage those labor needs during the height of the tourism season.
And quickly, just to touch upon the third point, when talking about the current penalty structure that's in line, um, just for introductory purposes, my name is Jake LaChance. I also work with the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, and I'm part of the advocacy team that works under and with Patrick. The current penalty structure is what we feel as though is fairly heavy-handed when it comes to penalizing the employer for any small mistake that can be made, whether it be with the wage reporting requirements to the Department of Labor, or to the actual remittance of wages when the time comes to the department. Right now, the penalty is 1% of a business's payroll for the quarter in which the violation happens. With the overall tax already being 1% total, an additional 1% for that quarter could have catastrophic implications, especially for small businesses. So moving towards a structure like Colorado, where it has that per employee um, uh, fine of $50, where an employer may have failed or forgotten to include that as a very slim aspect of the requirements made by the DOL. We feel as though that's far more appropriate, opposed to just a blanket 1% quarterly penalty that is currently instituted in law.
If I could, I would just emphasize a point that Mindy made, that the importance of tourism businesses in the state. This contributes $16 billion to the Maine economy annually. Maine restaurants and lodging and tourism businesses are the backbone of the Maine economy. So it's really critical that we have a program that's scaled and in line with the needs of Maine businesses and Maine's economy. Making sure that businesses aren't left empty-handed when it comes to staffing during the height of tourism season makes a huge difference in the ability for a business to succeed. We know that a business in Maine typically needs to make a seasonal business needs to make their revenue within 4 or 5 months out of the year, because the other months they're generally losing that revenue. So making sure that businesses have the labor staffing they need so that they aren't short is very critical, and we hope that this bill will help to address that.
In conclusion, we do think this legislation brings Maine's paid family medical leave into the mainstream. It ensures that employers can manage their workforce more easily during a period of acute labor shortage, aligns with other states' best practices on wage replacement levels, whereas in Maine, we have wage replacement as high as 90%, brings it in line with other states about 2/3, operationalizes this hardship provision that we've spoken about is critical for smaller businesses, those that have seasonality limitations on their workforce, and also really fits the moment for as we approach a fragility in the Maine economy to ensure that we balance key protections and also ensure that these employers aren't burdened by this new program. We're certainly appreciative of Representative Roberts and the bipartisan support for this and encourage the legislature to move forward with its enactment. Thank you, Ari. Thank you, Kate, if you're with us, and happy to answer any questions if there are follow-up.
All good on my account. Thank you.
Thank you, Ari. And as I had said before at the top of the meeting, this meeting has been recorded. So for those several journalists who had contacted saying they couldn't make this time, that will be distributed to them upon request. Thank you all for joining us on this Friday morning.